session, and I will start sharing my screen. Just give me a minute.
Yeah.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. And this is CMA Sunil Joshi. And over the next 90 minutes, I'll take this opportunity of sharing my experience and whatever I have learned and whatever I have actually been able to see over the last 26 years with the industry. I would certainly be sharing it with this team of participants. Okay? So first of all, let me ask you a very, very basic and very fundamental question. How many of us believe that preparing a profit and loss account and a balance sheet, or compiling the profit and loss account and a balance sheet, is actually the responsibility of finance function and not with any other function? Can we type yes or no in the chat box? Everyone, please. How many believe that this is something which has got to do only with finance function and with none other function? Yes, please. Viren, are you able to keep a track of the chat?
Yes, you can. Yeah. Are you able to see the chat? Yes, I can see a lot of people say it's a collaborative responsibility.
It's a collaborative responsibility.
Yes,
because
no. I think both the answers we are getting. Yes.
No, I can't see the chat box because I'm sharing the screen. So that's the reason why I depend on you.
So I think we have a mixed responses.
Yeah. Okay. And I think the understanding then obviously is very, very true, because when we are talking about the company's profit and loss account, when we're talking about the company's financials, the company's balance sheet, finance function is only compiling the numbers. They are not the ones who are actually generating the numbers. The numbers actually get generated on the field. So maybe it is the sales team which is trying to generate some numbers for the organization. So when they give a discount of 1%, or when they get a price rise of 1%, they are the ones who are actually supporting or destroying the company's P&L. When we talk about the purchase function, it is the purchase function, the price at which they purchase a particular article, that determining what exactly is going to be the impact on the company's finances. The cost out measures which they are taking. For example, if there is a manufacturing team and manufacturing team is able to control the manufacturing scrap, obviously they are helping the company to build on the profit and loss account. We had Mr. Kamal Joshi who spoke about the project financing. So if he is able to keep a track of what exactly is the budget given to him, ensuring that everything is completed within the given budget, he is obviously contributing to the P&L. So various functions in their respective areas, they are the ones who are actually generating the numbers. And finance function is only compiling all these numbers together and preparing an overall scenario for the company. And beyond a certain point, I think it is absolutely essential for every functional head to understand the impact of his actions or inactions on the company's finances. So for example, if there is a customer who's asking for a discount, and if the sales team says that, okay, we agree to it, then they should be in a position to evaluate the impact of that decision on the company's finances. They should also be in a position to find out, like, if this is the element of loss that we are going to suffer, then what incremental volume is required so that we are able to offset that loss. If a purchase team is sitting for negotiations and the vendor is asking for a price increase, then they need to find out the impact of that decision on the overall purchasing budget. And they also need to be able to find out some cost out opportunities that they can nullify this impact. So therefore, these are the various aspects. An HR person, for example, HR person should be able to analyze, like if you hire a person at this rate, then what is going to be the impact on the company's financials? If you do not get the people on time, then also it is absolutely essential that the person understands the impact of his action or inaction on the company's financials. Therefore, I think finance is one domain, one function which everybody needs to learn once he goes beyond a certain point. And especially for the functional heads, the departmental heads, it is absolutely essential for them to understand that they have a significant role to play in building the company's financials. So with this in background, with this in mind, there are a few topics that we'll be covering over the next 90 minutes. Obviously, 90 minutes is too short a period to cover the entire spectrum of finance, but we have picked up some items which we are going to discuss in brief. One is the element of budgetary control, because as Viren had rightly pointed out at the beginning, that we are going through a very, very difficult phase. And this is a phase where some control mechanisms, especially in the form of budgets, can help us control our expenses, can help us keep a track of where the expenses, where the targets are, whether they are being met or not. So budgetary control as a mechanism and its significance, we'll take a look at it.
So Sunilji, one question is there. Anyways, I request that every 15 minutes we'll have a window for questions. But since Mr. Bedi has asked, I just wanted to highlight that question. So Mr. Bedi says, but finance has responsibility towards strategy, business decision, working capital, purchase. They are not just compiling department. Would request a clarity. So just
No. This is absolutely right. We were only talking about, when I talk about the responsibility to prepare the financial profit and loss account. What I meant that they are compiling the numbers is that, when we talk about the element of salary, when we talk about the element of sales, etc., it is not accounts department which is generating sales. They are only recording how much sales have actually happened. So the person is absolutely right when he says that they are also the ones who are responsible for strategy and stuff like that, which is absolutely true. But what I wanted to convey is that every function has a role to play in company's profit and loss. Is that clear? Viren?
Yeah, I think. And keep your questions in the chat box. We'll ensure that we answer all your questions. But in the interest of the time, we will answer all these questions in the end and in between some interaction.
Certainly. Okay. We will also get introduced to the concepts of profit and loss account and the balance sheet. The concept of break-even point, something which is absolutely essential for every person, every company to understand. Because this is one aspect that tells us like what has to be the minimum revenue earning, what has to be the minimum level of invoicing which the company must attain so that they are able to sail through. So we'll take a look at the concept of break-even point. A new concept which is trying to establish itself in the market is about life cycle costing. And we'll take a look at this in detail. And another important aspect is to be able to control the business performances and how ratios can help us to determine whether the company is functioning properly or not. Take a look at that as well. And a significant portion of the control parts lies in what kind of MIS reports are shared with the manager. So if the reports happen to be prepared on time with accuracy, then obviously the company's performance can be elevated to a completely different level. So we will be taking a look at what kind of MIS reports could be generated and how those could be used by the management to keep a track of what is happening in the organization. See, some challenges which are faced in respect of understanding of finance. Maybe it becomes difficult, or it becomes slightly maybe out of the way to understand the profit and loss account and the balance sheet in the usual way it is prepared. We also should be in a position to understand the impact on the profitability of every action or inaction that the department doesn't take. How effectively can we use the concept of break-even point? And of course, budget as a control mechanism, how this can be used. And of course, the effective use of MIS to keep an eye on the costs, the targets, and the results. And understanding of finance can certainly help us elevate our performances and we can take the performance to a completely different level. So in this connection, let's start with the basic concept of budgetary control. Now, as you can see, the concept of the term budgetary control has two words, budgets and controls. So when any company tries to exercise controls by way of budgets, the process is called budgetary control. Okay. Now the objectives are, there are many objectives which can be attained by way of budgetary control. The most important one being to facilitate control over the activities. So for example, if there is a project which is being implemented, then budgetary control can certainly be used as a tool to ensure that all the activities are happening as per the schedule. The costs which are being incurred are exactly in line with the estimates. There is no escalation. And in case there are escalations, they are approved well in advance and everyone is aware of why they have been incurred. To achieve maximum profitability by planning the income and expenditure through the use of available resources. And this is particularly true in today's scenario, where most of the companies or many of the companies are actually facing labor shortage. They're also facing raw material shortage. So how can we make use of these available resources in the best possible manner so that we are able to increase or maximize the profitability is something that budgetary control can help us with. This can also play a very important role in reducing the losses and wastages to the minimum. Because there could be cases where wastage cannot be eliminated, but we can certainly make an attempt to minimize those wastages so that our losses are kept to the minimum. To bring out very clearly the expectations from various functions and departments. Now, this is obviously, I'm sure we all would be experiencing it, that at the beginning of the budget itself, at the beginning of the financial year itself, we are given the targets saying that this is what is expected from you. And if these targets are monitored as a part of control mechanism, these can help the individual and also the company to ensure that everything that is planned, everything that is expected is actually getting delivered. Another important aspect where the budgetary control plays a very important role is the coordination of various activities like production, like sales, like purchases, because they have to be the individual departments' objectives, they need to be integrated into the company's objectives. And for that to happen, there has to be one control system, which can certainly be in the form of a budgetary control system, so that all these departments, all these functions, and all these activities like production, sales, purchase, etc., they can work in support of each other. So this is basically the concept and objectives of budgetary control. Now, an extremely important element within budgetary control is to have a cash budget with us. Now, what is the objective of a cash budget? Obviously, to be able to forecast the requirements of cash adequately. Now, see, cash is basically a function where there could be many instances where we need to plan well in advance. So, for example, on 15th of September, we are required to pay the installment of advance tax. And if on 14th of September, if the finance department realizes that we don't have adequate cash, then this actually can be very embarrassing from the company's point of view. But if a finance person is able to draw up a cash budget well in advance, let's say at least 2 months in advance, and if he is able to foresee that in the month of September, we are likely to fall short of cash because maybe the collections are not happening, the sales are not up to the mark, maybe some other bank installments are also falling due, then he has 2 months in advance to react or to respond to the situation. He can certainly approach the banks and the financial institutions, get the required limits enhanced, and this way he can ensure that the company doesn't have to face any kind of embarrassment. And why this is required? Ensure that the unit is able to meet its obligations on any given time. Okay. Now, in case the company is expecting excess cash, which is also quite possible, that in a particular month, let's say there have been heavy collections, we don't have those many expenses planned. So you can decide whether you want to invest them somewhere else and earn some additional money out of it, additional income out of it. And in case the company is likely to be short of cash, in case they foresee some cash crunch, then the unit will certainly have a time to respond to the situation. They will certainly have to go to the bank. Bank will have their own time frame in which the limit can be enhanced. So therefore, a cash budget is something which is extremely important for every function. Now, let's take, now this is from the company's point of view, but even from the individual department's point of view, if we are given a budget saying that this is the maximum that you can spend, and a person is able to ensure that all the expenses, all the maybe every kind of expenses, he's ensuring that the cash budget is not exceeded at all. This can certainly help him to keep a track on the expenses part. Another concept that we all need to be aware of is called the concept of flexible budget. And in most of the corporates, this is called the forecasting part. So generally, there's a difference between the terms budgets and forecast. Budget is generally prepared for the full year, and forecast generally happens for the remaining part of the year. So for example, if you're preparing a forecast in Q1, that means Q1 actuals plus estimates or the revised estimates for the remaining 3 quarters. That is how a forecast is normally done. And this, in management accounting terms, is called flexible budget. So for example, for 2020, when the company would have prepared a budget, nobody would have ever anticipated the impact of pandemic to such an extent. So let's say in the month of October or November of 2019, when we had already finalized the budget for 2020, there was a certain target in terms of sales, in terms of top line, in terms of bottom line that was decided for the company. But if the company has not been functional, company has not been operational for major part of the first half, we certainly cannot expect the company to be delivering on the final targets. It is impossible. So there is no point in sticking to the original plan, the original budget that was prepared more than 8 months ago. You need to have a plan. You need to have a revised number which can reflect the market reality. And this is called flexible budget. So in the remaining part of the year, what is the total turnover that we are anticipating? What are the total expenses that we are anticipating? Now, when these are prepared, you know what exactly is the deviation from the original plan. And then we can look out for opportunities by which we can reduce our expenses so that at least some portion of the deficit can be made good. And this is basically the function of flexible budget. And, because why is it required to be done? Because every time there is always some kind of revision in the numbers. Maybe in 2016, we had the impact of demonetization. Suddenly, everything came to a standstill. Especially people who are dealing with the aftermarket, people who are dealing in the retail segment, they had a tough time. So in case there are some major challenges which are happening or which are affecting the economy, then we should also be in a position to change our numbers to reflect the market reality. So when the originally prepared budget is changed, is altered, is flexed to reflect the changing market conditions, it is called forecasting, or it is also called flexible budget. Okay, how many companies, of the participants that we have today, how many companies are experiencing forecasting and budgeting? How many times the forecast is prepared? Can you put that in the chat box? Yes, Viren, what are the answers?
So annual, Mr. Bedi is saying annual.
Okay, we have only annual budgets. Okay, now in case there are any companies who are probably working only on annual targets, then this could be a good tool that you could make use of, because you could always reflect the market reality. In case you are anticipating the original budget to still stand and it is still to be considered valid, well and good, you are certainly one of the luckiest ones. But in case you anticipate the changes to be of a very great magnitude, in that case, it makes sense to reflect the market reality. The second type of budget, which is normally prepared across companies and across industries, it's called the functional budget. So when budgets are prepared by functions and departments to meet the overall targets set by the company, it is said to be a functional budget. So for example, a manufacturing team will have to prepare a manufacturing budget, like how many pieces of a particular model are to be prepared. What exactly is going to be the manpower with which this is to be happening? Do we need any additional machinery to support our functions? What is the overtime which is planned? What is the overtime which is given as a target? What is the manufacturing scrap that we can think of? I mean, do we have any plan to reduce this kind of manufacturing scrap? Similarly, a purchase team could be having a budget prepared only for that particular function in terms of salaries, in terms of vendor development, in terms of cost outs. So when all these functions prepare their own budgets and which are together, let's say, weave together to meet the overall target set by the company, we are basically referring to a system of budgetary control. And this is one part of it where every department, every function, every stream is required to prepare a budget for their own functions. But in today's world, in today's scenario, one thing which is going to be of absolute importance is called zero-based budgeting. Now, zero-based budgeting is completely different from the traditional way of budgeting. Now, traditionally, whenever we are planning for a budget, normally what we do is we look at what exactly has been happening in the past. To give you a very simple example, let's say I have to plan for my sales expenses or my traveling expenses for the next year. So I'll look at what exactly was the total spend in the previous year. And let's say that comes to around 20 lakhs. And I know that my total sales that I was able to clock was 20 crores. So for 20 crores, I spent rupees 20 lakhs in terms of traveling. So in case next year, if the target is 30 crores, then considering inflation, etc., maybe I will plan for a budget of maybe around 30 lakhs. So this is how traditionally the budgets are prepared in terms of expenses. You look at inflation, you look at the level of activity, and then decide what could be the nature of spending that you could go ahead with. Zero-based budget is completely different. Here, we don't look at what has happened in the past. We will only allow a particular expense based on its utility. So for example, if there is a machine which is planned, then the total cost which is likely to be incurred on that particular machine and the total benefits that the company expects to draw out of by utilizing that machine, the benefits should be able to outweigh the cost. So benefits should be more than the cost. And only in that case, the expenditure or the approval would be given to go ahead and purchase that equipment. So zero-based budget has nothing to do with what has happened in the past. It only looks at the cost benefit analysis. And as long as the benefits outweigh the cost, or only when the benefits outweigh the cost, the approval to spend the money is given. And in today's scenario, I think this is one aspect which just cannot be ignored. Before we decide to spend any amount, it is absolutely important that we weigh the benefits which are likely to be coming the company's way before deciding to spend that amount. Okay. Any comments or any explanation required on the budgetary control part before we start with the new?
Yeah, you can simply unmute also. We'll have just short touch points so that there is some. Can we go to previous slide? So this one. Simply unmute and also ask a question.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Bedi, anything specific you want to ask from this slide?
Sir, this zero-based budgeting is overall budgeting of the organization, or it is a functional budgeting. That means every function has got a target for the bottom line, or for cutting the fixed cost. So, is it the overall zero-based budgeting of the organization, or it is pertaining to function?
No, see, this is something which is universal. It can be applied in any function and in any organization. So if you want to apply this for the organization as a whole, you can do it. But this can very well be used when we talk about departmental budgets also. This can be done.
Okay, are we going into specifics of how to do Zero-based budgeting?
Not in this webinar, because we have only 90 minutes time and there are too many topics to be covered. But we have a detailed session coming up, and this is one of the topics that is going to be discussed in that entire program.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Can I go ahead?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Now let's talk about the income statement, which is it is also called the profit and loss account in the common man's language.
So I'll just know one question is there. Some example for zero-based budgeting from construction project. Can you give some example for this construction project?
For construction projects. So for example, if you're talking about buying a machine which can substitute for labor, in that case, you could take a look at what exactly is the amount which is required to be spent on buying that machine, and what is the current expenses that you're incurring on the labor cost. And if you believe that overall, either in terms of efficiency, in terms of maybe their nuisance value, it is always advisable to have a machine. Obviously, these are the benefits that the company is going to be deriving when they have a machine. So as long as the benefits are more than the expenses which the company is incurring today, the company can decide to go ahead and buy that machine. Okay.
Yeah, I think it answered the question. Yeah.
Great. So basically, when we talk about the profit and loss account, what is a profit and loss account? So let me just put it very, very simply, that it's a very, very simple statement. Now, what does it do? It compares all the expenses with the revenues which the company is earning in a given period. So for example, if you're talking about profit and loss account for the month of August, the company would be compiling all the sales and the income which has happened during the month of August versus all the expenses which the company has incurred in terms of material consumption, in terms of power and fuel, in terms of wages, salaries, traveling, insurance, etc. And then we compare the expenses with the earnings. And if the earnings are more than the expenses, it results in a profit. And if the earnings are less than the expenses, then this is going to result in a loss. A profit and loss account is always drawn for a given period. So for example, a profit and loss for the year ended so-and-so. Profit and loss account for the month of so-and-so. So the basic difference between this income statement and the next statement, which is the position statement, the balance sheet, is that income statement, the profit and loss account is always drawn for a given period, and a balance sheet is always drawn on a given date. So if you're talking about the financial year ending on 31st March 2020, and if you are talking about the income statement, then we are basically referring to the profit and loss account for the entire period of April 2019 to March 2020. So इस सारे periods में जितना भी sale company ने earn किया है versus जितने expenses earn किए हैं, जो incur किए हैं, इन दोनों का हम comparison करें. But the same is not applicable when we talk about the balance sheet. A balance sheet, is always drawn on a given day. So balance sheet is basically a list of assets and liabilities on the day when the accounts are being closed. So that means the position on 31st of March 2020 is what will get reflected in the balance sheet. Profit and loss account is prepared for the entire year. So what do we have over here? So it compares the revenues with the expenses. On the revenue side, it could be revenue from any angle. It could be sales, it could be sale of scrap, it could be miscellaneous income, it could be interest, it could be discounts, it could be even foreign currency gains. And on the expenses and losses side, we could have material consumption, salaries and wages, transportation, insurance, traveling, rent, including depreciation, etc. Okay, the list is only indicative. Obviously, this is not an exhaustive list. Every company, depending upon the nature of industry and the kind of expenses and the setup they have, the expenses could be completely different, or it could be, there could be other expenses also which are being incurred by the organization. A balance sheet, I am assuming that most of the participants would be from non-commerce background, and let's say most of them would be engineers, and engineers would be having a lot of equations that they can boast of. we accountants have only one equation, which is assets is always equal to liabilities plus owner's contribution, which is capital. So assets is equal to liabilities plus capital. This is the only equation in accounting which is existing. What do we have? Asset is something that the company owns. That means in the form of cash, in the form of inventories, in the form of receivables like debtors, building, land, equipment, investment, vehicles, trademarks, patents, copyrights. It could be anything. Every item which a company owns is what is called an asset. And anything that the company owes is a liability. So when a company owes its creditors in terms of payables for goods, it could be payables for services, some expenses which are required to be paid, they're not paid as yet, outstanding expenses. All these are basically all these are considered to be liabilities. And this is the reason. And at any point of time, the assets will always be equal to the liabilities. Because we are talking about the equation. So both sides of the equation have to be tallying, they need to be equal. So assets and liabilities at any point of time will have to match. They will have to match. Now, an income statement that we are generally used to, what does it have? So it has a sale. From the sale, we can take out the cost of manufacturing, which is basically the material cost and the expenses which are related to conversion. What we get is gross profit in this case, income minus the manufacturing expenses. And from the manufacturing expenses, when you take out the elements of S, G, and A, which is selling, general, and administrative expenses, we are referring to an element of net profit. Now, why do we have to take this separately? Because we are deliberately keeping a distinction between expenses related to manufacturing and expenses of support nature. So manufacturing expenses could be the salaries and wages which are paid to workers who are employed on the shop floor, the material cost which is being incurred, the consumable cost, the power and fuel cost. Now these are the expenses which are related to directly manufacturing of the product. Because the company would like to keep a track of how much is being incurred at the manufacturing level, and out of that, how much is being spent on the support net or the support network that we have created, and finally, what exactly is the net profit. So to be able to understand the difference between gross profit and net profit, it is the expenses are deliberately separated between manufacturing and support expenses. Now, another important aspect which I'm sure most of us would be aware of is the concept of, or the other concept of EBIT and EBITDA. Now, every functional manager, every operational manager is extremely interested in the concept of EBITDA. Now, what is EBITDA? EBITDA means earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. So if you look at if you elaborate this term, it is earning before interest, tax, and depreciation. So iska matlab, whatever the company is able to generate by selling and manufacturing and support expenses without having to worry about any kind of financing cost in the form of interest, any form of taxation, which obviously is not under our control at all. And if you completely eliminate the impact of depreciation and amortization. So in short, we are actually talking about the cash getting generated from operations. And therefore, every production manager, every plant manager would be extremely interested in this concept of EBITDA. This also shows, or this can also help the company increase its borrowing power. Okay. And once we take out from the EBITDA, when we take out depreciation and amortization, what we are left with is EBIT, earnings before interest and tax. And from this concept, from this term, if you take out the impact of cost of financing, what is left is earning before tax. And after that, if you take out taxation, then what remains with the company is earnings after tax, EAT. This is, it's a very simple statement. And trust me, it is not that difficult to understand when you look at the company's financials also. But every company needs to understand how much cash is actually getting generated from the business and how much is being lost in terms of financing and depreciation, etc. And what is finally remaining with the company in the form of earnings after tax. Now, there is an element of gross profit which every company, every especially manufacturing company is needs to have, and especially for manufacturing company, but this is also something which is applicable to the service-related organizations. The gross profit is nothing but the manufacturing profit. Now, there are a number of factors which determine or which can impact the element of gross profit, like the material usage, the material savings and cost outs, capacity usage of the plant, the scrap, the employee efficiency, the machine efficiency, the cost of quality, overtime cost. These are all the factors which are directly under the control of the management. These are, and therefore they play an important role in defining the level of gross profit. What are the other factors which can affect the profitability rate? Obviously, the use of excess resources in terms of material, in terms of man hours. For example, in an IT company, if you had anticipated that a particular project would get over in 100 hours, and if you're spending 120 hours, then for those incremental 20 hours, probably the customer is not going to pay for it. But this is clearly a leakage of revenue, a leakage of profit that we had decided and we had anticipated. Price variance also plays a very important role. You decide to buy a particular item at a particular rate, and the actual purchase happens at a completely different rate. There's a price variance, and this is certainly going to have an impact on the profitability rate of the organization. Inventory differences. At the end of the year, we are required to physically count the number of inventories, number of pieces, and in case there is any difference, then that is to be written off, along with the reversal of the input tax credit that we would have availed in terms of GST. Any amount of premium freight, we are not able to arrange for material in time, therefore you have to ask for a premium freight. This certainly is going to have an impact on the profitability. Overtime payments. In case there are a lot of power failures and you are required to generate power, then this is certainly going to have an impact on the profitability rate. Consumable tools, scraps, wastage, reworks, any kind of major repairs work, and finally, the cost of non-conformance, which is basically the warranty cost. Now, all these would have a lot of impact on determining the profitability rate of an organization. Another concept that we keep on hearing within the organization is CapEx and OpEx. Now, a CapEx is an item of capital nature. So these are the expenses, or these are the items which are purchased only once, but the benefit is availed by the organization for many, many years to come. So for example, you buy a machine. The machine is purchased only once, but thereafter, the machine is put to use and the company is able to generate a lot of revenue out of that. Okay, so benefit is availed by the company over an extended period, whereas the expense is incurred only once. This is an item of CapEx. CapEx stands for capital expenditure. And these are generally expenses of long-term nature. Then we have a concept of OpEx, which is operational expenses. Now, these are the items which are required to be incurred for either maintaining a capital item or to maintain the operational readiness of the organization. So for example, when a company buys a machine, it is a CapEx. But when the machine is getting repaired, minor repairs, that is basically an operational expense. So this is the difference between CapEx and OpEx. So why is it important to have a distinction between CapEx and OpEx? Because the items which are spent on CapEx will be sitting in the balance sheet, and the items which are spent on OpEx will be sitting in the profit and loss account. Because the two statements are different, we need to be very careful in classifying these expenditures between CapEx and OpEx. And probably you would now realize that this is the reason why the finance function is very, very meticulous in segregating the expenses between CapEx and OpEx. Because CapEx will go and hit the balance sheet, whereas OpEx will be hitting the profit and loss account. The nature is completely different. Okay. Any questions regarding the topics covered so far?
Sir, can you explain once again the support expenses SGA which you touched upon?
Yeah, sure. Just one second. This one, SG&A.
Yeah, support expenses. Yes, sir.
Sure.
How they are affecting the net profit, sir?
Okay. See, generally what happens is we have a manufacturing team, which is generating the products, and but can they do it all by themselves? The answer is no, because they would certainly need some kind of support, some kind of backup in terms of administration department, accounts department, purchase function. Now, these are the functions which are supporting the main process of manufacturing. So the expenses which a company incurs in departments or on departments like administration, on departments like purchase function, on departments like accounting function, who are not directly involved in the manufacturing process, but they are supporting the act of manufacturing. A sales function, for example, sales is not directly concerned with manufacturing, but they are the ones who are helping the organization to realize money, to earn money by selling the product in the market. So maybe a showroom which has been created, a godown which has been created. These are all the support expenses which we are referring to. The SG&A stands for selling, general, and administrative expenses.
Right. Thank you, sir. Clear, sir.
One more question we have from Ankur is, administrative support items such as table, chair, telephone purchase should be part of CapEx or OpEx?
It all depends upon the individual nature. For example, if you're buying in bulk, then furniture, etc., will have to be capitalized. And it's a good question, like when we talk about telephone. So if you're buying a cell phone is a CapEx, it's a capital expenditure, because that is going to be incurred only once. But the recharge, or every month we are paying some kind of expenses to the telephone company, that would be under OpEx. So buying a cell phone is a capital item, but recharging to keep it running is certainly an optional item. That is the difference between CapEx and OpEx.
Okay. One more question we have from Arun is, what is the meaning of amortization cost?
Okay. Now, amortization is same as depreciation. The only difference being depreciation is a concept which is used in case of tangible assets. Amortization is generally used in case of intangible assets. Okay. So what are tangible assets? Tangible assets are items like which can be touched. For example, land, building, plant and machinery, air conditioner, vehicles. These are all tangible assets. Or even a computer or laptop. Now, what are intangible assets? Intangible assets are in the form of goodwill. Intangible assets are in the form of copyright, patent, trademark, a computer software. These are all intangible expenses, intangible assets. So when these intangible assets are depreciated, we don't call them depreciation, we call them amortization. Is it clear?
Yeah, I think we can move forward.
Great, thank you.
Sir, one time again, sir, this tangible and intangible with regards to amortization?
Yes, sir. See, tangible assets are assets which can be touched. The very definition of the meaning tangible is something that can be touched, felt, experienced. But when we talk about intangible assets, now intangible assets are those assets which we know are there, but we can't touch them. So for example, if you're talking about a cell phone, a cell phone, is it a tangible asset or an intangible asset? Amalji?
This is tangible because we
this
can
is tangible asset. Okay, but the operating system on which it runs, can you see that?
No, sir, that is hidden.
And therefore it is intangible. Okay, so this is basically the distinction between tangible and intangible. So when the tangible assets are depreciated, when they lose their value every year, we call it depreciation. And when the intangible assets are written down, those are called amortization.
Right, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, what exactly is a break-even point? In engineering term, there is a concept called maybe bursting strength, and I'm sure all the engineers would agree to it. What is the meaning of the term bursting strength? The way I have understood it is, it means the maximum load which a surface can take. Now, similarly, a break-even point is a point which every businessman needs to understand, every business, maybe business head or a functional head, he needs to understand that what is that minimum in terms of earning which has to be made every month so that the company is able to sail through. So break-even point, break-even analysis establishes a relationship between the cost with the sales volume. So in a layman's language, this is a point the sales volume kind of loss which is being suffered or incurred by the organization. Now let me give a very simple example. Let's say the total expenses of a firm are rupees 50,000 on a monthly basis. That means the company will have to earn somehow rupees 50,000 for its obligations. And therefore, 50,000 in this particular case becomes the break-even point. मतलब कितना सेल कंपनी ने करना ही है, मतलब what is it that minimum they have to earn in terms of invoicing that they are able to meet their monthly obligations. That is what is meant by a break-even point. What is the significance? To be able to understand how much sales volume and value is needed for the company to survive. There would be a number of cases where maybe the customer is asking for a discount. The customer, maybe a vendor is asking for a price increase. So we should be able to find out, we should be able to analyze the impact of such increase in prices on the break-even point. On one hand, there is a vendor who's asking for a price increase, and on the other hand, there is a customer who's asking for a discount. So we should also be in a position to understand what is the impact of such discounts being demanded by the customers. How much is the break-even point going to be shifting by? Because if you have this kind of numbers in front of you, it becomes easy to take a decision based on the situation. The impact of increments in salaries and wages to employees. If I give an increment of 5%, if I give an increment of 10%, how much is going to be the impact on P&L? That's one thing. But more importantly, how much is the break-even point shifting by? That is also something which every company be knowing. And impact of underutilization of plant capacity on the business. You created a massive setup, but unfortunately that is not getting utilized. Then what is it? What is the impact of this on the break-even point? Is also something that we all need to be aware of.
Yeah. So one question we have is like, that means we won't have profit.
At break-even point, there is no profit. And the moment you start billing more than that, so for example, 50,000 rupees, as we saw in the example, was the break-even point. The moment the earning happens to be 50,001, that 1 rupee is straightway going to impact the profit. But the moment the billing happens to be less than 50,000, you can be sure that the company is going to incur a loss. Now, another important aspect that we all could be utilizing very, very effectively is the element of cost sheet. Now, what is a cost sheet? This is again a very simple statement that all types of costs are clubbed together according to their nature and according to the function to which they belong. Now, this statement would certainly help a business to understand how much is being spent in which area, and thereby help the organization to control the various aspects and improve the overall profitability. Now, this is a simple statement that I've tried to prepare. You have raw material cost and wages cost, which are together termed as prime cost. Then the expenses which are related in the manufacturing area, like the factory overheads, the factory rent, the power and fuel, the consumables, etc., which together are known as factory overheads, something which is related to the manufacturing part. Then we have the administrative overheads. That means the expenses which are incurred in the administrative areas, the salaries to staff, the office rent, the electricity charges, etc. And all these together would be clubbed together as admin overheads. Then we have selling and distribution overheads, the expenses which are related in relation to the salary of the sales staff, the showroom rent, all the expenses in terms of sales, and therefore they are grouped together, clubbed together in the form of selling and distribution expenses. All these expenses together would be called the cost of sales, And when this cost of sales is compared with the sales, the resulting number is either a profit or loss. So it is the same income statement being distributed in by functions or by expenses which are incurred according to the functions. Now, why is this important? Because we can easily make out that when we talk about the total cost as 100 rupees, the manufacturing cost, the wages and the material cost itself is around 61% of it. The factory overheads account for 10%. The administrative overheads are another 16%. And selling and distribution are amounting to, or they are in the range of around 13%. So every functional head would be able to understand where, in which area, how much actually is being spent. And this can very well be used when we are talking about, let's say, when we have to prepare a quotation very quickly, and we don't know how much is going to be the overall cost. But if we have a ready-made format like this can certainly come, come handy, and we can formulate a quotation very easily. So, for example, if the raw material cost that we are anticipating is going to be of 100 rupees, and so you just go back and check, like if the raw material cost is around 10 lakhs, the wages are 2 lakhs, which is 20% of the raw material cost. We have 20% of raw material costs built as raw material, as labor cost. Then you say that factory overheads are again 2 lakhs, which is 20%. Administrative overheads are 3,25,000, and selling and distribution overheads are approximately 2,52,000. So similarly, 20% can be budgeted for in terms of factory overheads, 32.5% in terms of admin cost, and 25.2% in terms of sales. That means the total cost is going to be 197.7 rupees. Okay. Now, assuming that the company has to earn a minimum margin of 10% on cost, that means you need a sales, a markup of 19 rupees. That means the minimum price at which this can be quoted is 270 rupees. So a cost sheet can be very, very handy when we are talking about preparation of quotations, etc. Another important aspect that, and this is something which is applicable not just for the company, but even for maybe the sales team, they would like to understand which company or which product is giving us what kind of profitability. Because let's be very clear about one thing, that not every customer and every product that we are dealing with will give us the same amount of profitability. And there is a general understanding that whenever we have to increase sales, let's increase, whenever we have to increase the profitability, let's increase the sales. It could be right in some of the cases, but many times what happens is, if you are able to drop the unprofitable segments, even with lesser efforts, the profitability can be increased. But to be able to find out, like, which are those products and which are those customers who are not giving us good margins, it is important that we have the product-wise and customer-wise profitability drawn up very, very clearly. And a good costing system, a good management accounting system in today's world, in today's scenario, is an absolute must. We need to be able to find out how much every product is able to earn us, how much every customer is actually giving us in terms of profitability. And anybody who's not giving us margins, anybody who's not giving us, in fact, if you sell more to that particular customer, you are actually adding to your losses. If this is the scenario, then the company is in a position to take decisions immediately. So there's again a simple format that I've prepared. Like, there could be a sales in terms of products, in terms of services, in terms of spares, etc. And these are the various customers that the company is dealing with. Then what is the material cost? What is the amount of contribution, which is the difference between sales and material cost? What are the expenses? And expenses could be of two natures. Expenses which are directly identified. So maybe there is a freight cost which is incurred only on a particular customer. So you could place that particular expense under that customer's column. There could be warranty which is associated only with one particular customer. So again, that is a part of the clearly identified expenses. But apart from that, whatever expenses are incurred for the company as a whole, those need to be allocated on some predefined basis. So identified and allocated expenses will give us the total expense. And from the contribution, if you take out these expenses, what remains is profit for the P. And this way, you can easily make out like which company or which customer is giving us what kind of margins. Okay, and this again is very, very essential because every functional head should understand the customer wise and the product wise profitability. Another important aspect is the ratios which a business can use for measuring its performance. Generally, the ratios are classified into 4 major categories. The liquidity ratio. And this ratio is generally used to judge the liquidity condition. Liquidity means whether the company is in a position to meet its obligations on an immediate basis. The obligations which are on hand immediately. The turnover ratios. That means with the setup that the company has created, what is the amount of revenue which the company is able to generate? That is the turnover ratio. Solvency ratio. For example, if you're dealing with a new company and whether we are actually dealing with a good company or not, not just on the basis of references, but financial analysis needs to be done so that we don't land ourselves into trouble. Whether the company is really solvent, whether the company is financially strong, whether the company will be able to meet its obligations or not, we should be in a position to have this kind of analysis done before we decide to go ahead with them and commit ourselves on a long-term basis. And finally, there are profitability ratios which help us judge the profitability of the company in terms of return on capital, return on investment, gross profit, net profit, etc. Now, let me take a very simple example of to be able to judge the financial position of the company. Let's say I am trying to deal with a new company, and I want to find out whether this company is actually going to pay me on time or not. How do I judge that? So if the current ratio, which is the working capital ratio, which is also called the working capital ratio, is 2:1. That means for every amount of liability, every rupee of liability, the company has backup in the form of 2 rupees in the form of current assets. That means the company is good to proceed. Now, what are current liabilities? Current liabilities means all those amounts which are payable in the immediate future. So these could be creditors, this could be bills payable, and these could be some taxes which are to be paid immediately. And current assets mean all those which can be easily converted into cash. For example, inventories, for example, debtors, for example, short-term investments, and the amount of cash and bank balance that the company has. So for every rupee of liability, if the company has a backup in the form of assets, current assets, to the extent of 2 rupees, this indicates that the company has a very, very sound financial position and the company would be able to meet its current obligations pretty easily. Nothing to worry about. Profitability ratios, we have spoken about it in detail, so we can skip this. This is a new concept which is trying to find itself in the market, trying to establish itself in the market, and that is about life cycle costing. Now, life cycle costing says that you should not look at individual transactions. There could be many situations where probably the company has to reduce the prices substantially to be able to stay in the competition. And under these circumstances, we should not be looking at the profit or loss which is made by the company on the initial sale alone, but we should be looking at the overall billing to the customer and the cost which are associated with it over a long period of time. And let me give you a very simple example. So for example, initially we sold a machine to one of the customers. The sale value was 7,50,000. The cost associated was 7 lakhs. So on a sale of 7,50,000, we were able to make a margin of just 50,000, which is 6.67%. But because the customer purchased machine from us, he also had to come to us for the spares requirement, where the billing was to the extent of 1 lakh. We made a margin of 25% on such billings. The customer, because the very fact that he had purchased the machine from us, he requested for some design change. We charged him 35,000 rupees. And this was done by a design engineer in maybe just a couple of days. And the notional cost which was associated with this change was only 3,000 rupees. That means we were able to make a margin of 31,000 on this transaction, which is a staggering 90%. So if you look at the overall billing which has happened to this customer over the period, it is 8,85,000. And the overall profit that we have been able to clock on this customer is 1,06,000, which is around 12.05%. And I'm sure everyone would agree that in today's scenario, if you are able to have record this kind of profit of 12.05%, it is certainly not a bad deal. So we should not be looking at the transaction, the initial transaction alone, but we should be looking at the overall profit that the company has been able to make by dealing with this customer. Now, it all depends upon the effective utilization of MIS. If there is a strong MIS which is being generated by the company, and the company would be certainly in a position to take corrective actions wherever required. So a strong and effective MIS should be able to provide correct information. It should be able to provide timely information so that corrective actions can be taken. It should also be able to drive businesses, not just record, but the purpose of MIS is to be able to drive the business results.
And there's one request on profitability ratio. Can we just quickly have, profitability ratio also once again?
Okay, just 1 second. This one? Okay. The reason why I skipped it because we had discussed about the concept of gross profit and net profit, although we did not discuss about the ratios part. Okay, now what is a gross profit ratio? It is basically to understand how much profit is being made at the manufacturing level. So it is the gross profit divided by sales into 100. And naturally, because we are talking about profitability ratios, the understanding is that higher the better. This profit ratio should be as high as possible so that we are able to generate enough profit for the company. Again, net profit ratio means the rate of net profit earned and is calculated as net profit divided by sales. Now, what is net profit? As we had seen in one of the earlier slides, it is gross profit less SG&A, less support expenses. So whatever remains with the company is net profit. Again, higher the ratio, the better it is for the organization. Is it okay? Virenji, thank you.
Yeah, good.
So there's a new report which is generally being used in the industry and especially in the manufacturing one, which is called the red flag report. Now, what is a red flag report? Now, this is basically a warning report. If things are not happening as per the expectations, maybe the project cost is getting escalated, things are not happening on time, there is likely to be a deviation in terms of the timeline. So there is a red flag which is indicated right at the beginning so that the company management has a time to respond to the situation. And there are numerous areas where this can be used. Let me show you an example. In terms of debtors, for example, debtors means receivables. So increase in overdue receivables on a consistent basis. That means the customers are not paying us on time. So this certainly is likely to create a lot of pressure on the cash reserves, which means in case the cash is not enough, then you will probably have to go to the banks and financial institutions, get your limit enhanced, and borrow from the bank, which would have an impact on the profitability because you will have to pay interest to the bank. Unreconciled ledger balances with the customers. We have a lot of customers, they're also paying, but we don't know whether what they're paying is exactly as per what we have as receivables in our books of accounts. And I have seen a lot of companies who just stop paying because the accounts are not reconciled. So unreconciled ledger balances is also something that you need to be aware of. Customers asking for discounts at the time of payments. Very strange. You have a PO which is there. Everything is happening. You have already supplied the material. But in spite of that, maybe the customer is trying to play some dirty tricks and he's trying to demand some discounts. DSO, which means the days sales outstanding. It is generally a parameter which is used for understanding how much receivables are yet to be collected from the market. That is constantly on a high. And increase in sales, but unfortunately in the unprofitable segment. So if these are the cases, and every time we go for negotiations with the customer is slashing the prices unilaterally. These are some of the instances of a red flag report. Apart from this, we can also have a lot of MIS reports, like in terms of material cost. How does the material cost compare with what was planned? What was the inflation that in terms of raw material that was planned, and how much is it now? What has been the extra expenditure in terms of premium freight? Maybe the customer is based in Delhi, we are in Pune, and the vendor is based in Delhi, and because of sudden increase in requirement and the distance involved, we request the vendor to ship us the material not by the normal rate road transport, but by air. Now, this is certainly going to cost us a huge amount in terms of premium freight. How many contracts have been signed with the vendors with the shipping terms that X works? That means we as a company are expected to go to the vendor's gate and pick up the material. That means the entire cost associated with loading, with transportation, with the other entry tax, etc., will have to be borne by us. How many contracts have been signed with the customers with the shipping terms that door delivery? So while our vendors are expecting the material to be lifted from their gate, our customers are demanding exactly the opposite. They want the material to be dispatched at their gate. So in both the cases, we are the ones who are bearing the transportation expenses. What has been the element of inventory variances along with the impact of GST reversal? So these are some of the ways in which the cost can be found out. And this is a simple example to find out how every function, I have just taken one sample case of, as a salesperson, how can we contribute to a better and stronger bottom line? So obviously by getting better prices for the company's products, by getting better shipping terms, by getting better payment terms. So if the customer was saying, I'll pay you in 60 days, if a salesperson is able to get it in 45 days, that's a better payment term. By getting better shipping terms. So every time the customer is demanding door delivery and we are able to do it on an X works basis, that's a good shipping term from the company's point of view. By ensuring that the payments are collected on due dates, by ensuring that the claims against warranties are strictly evaluated before acceptance, by ensuring that the expired bank guarantees are collected and submitted to the banks. Now, this one aspect, point number 6, is very, very important. Because unless you are able to collect the expired bank guarantees and unless we submit them to the banks, the bank is not going to release the limit that they have blocked. And as long as the limit is being utilized, we will continue to pay interest on that. So by doing a simple exercise like collecting the bank guarantee from the customers and submitting it to the bank, the salesperson is actually helping the company to increase its profitability. So these are the different ways in which we can, and what are the different topics that we can.
Yeah, one question we have is elaboration on top line and bottom line concept.
Okay, top line means the total amount of sales, and because it is written at the top, it is generally referred to as a top line. And bottom line is the final result, the result of sales minus expenses, which is generally referred to as a profit or loss. That is the bottom line.
Another one is, can the customer claim expired bank guarantee?
No. If it is within the, let's say the grace period, then you never know. So that is the reason why it is absolutely essential for us to be able to collect expired bank guarantees on time.
Okay. And another one is, for a standard company, what is the recommended GP ratio and NP ratio?
Well, this is a very difficult question to answer because it all depends upon whether you are into manufacturing or IT or logistics, or it depends upon the industry. But for a manufacturing company, a general GP ratio of 20% plus is considered to be very, very healthy.
Okay, we can move forward. I think we are almost towards the end. We'll open up for more questions, definitely.
See, something, obviously, we'll be taking a look at the profit and loss account of the balance sheet. We will discuss about the concept of break-even point. Decision making concerning make or buy. These are the usual questions that the functional heads, they have to take care of. decisions involving allocation of scarce resources so as to optimize their use, how every department and function can contribute towards profit. We'll also be taking a look at the significance of budgetary control system, standard costing, which we haven't been able to discuss over here, but how that can be used as a control mechanism, the accounting ratios to judge the performances, the internal controls and their significance, life cycle costing, product-wise and customer-wise profitability, and of course, many, many more examples. And all these are going to be real-life examples. So if we all believe, if we still believe that accounts and costing kills, I think it's time to relook at it, because it is actually a skill that can help us transform our business. Thank you very much. I have come to the end of the session, and I am now open to questions.
Great. So we have a couple of, thank you, Sunilji, for wonderful session. And it's a heavy subject. We all can understand, like it takes time to consume, but it's a very, very crucial and important element of business, which can make or break a business. So, and I think as a working professional, it's very important to understand these finer things, and which can help us to take a next step. So I will just read out a couple of questions before we formally close, and I share that if you wish to associate with us for a more deeper conversation, how we can assist you. So the next question is, can you explain ROCE concept?
It is return on capital employed. So this basically, it's the profit that you have earned versus the resources that we have employed. So if we have a total capital employed of 100 rupees and we have a net profit of 10 rupees, that means the ROCE is 10%. So it means whatever the company has been able to earn versus the resources which have been put to use. That's the ratio.
Another question is, bank guarantee we can get from back by paying money or limit?
The ideal thing is, if you go and return those bank guarantees to the bank, there's no question of paying anything. The bank would have anyway classified the limit. They would have kept some portion of the limit which is sanctioned to us, towards the bank guarantee. And as long as the bank guarantee is not given back to them, the bank assumes that this limit is being constantly utilized. And because we are utilizing that limit, the interest is constantly charged to us. So by doing a very simple exercise of returning that bank guarantee, we can get the limit released.
Another question is, after gross profit, how much could be the net profit percentage? Factors affecting the net profit?
Factors affecting the net profit are the entire setup cost which the company has created. So for example, there is a posh office which is created. There is a maybe a sales team which is there. Sales team has been given a lot of sales, or not just sales, but let's say general, all the executives have been provided with vehicles, the cars, etc. So the depreciation on these expenses, or depreciation on these assets, the incentives which are given to them, the cost of setup which is created, all these. For example, if every employee is allowed to travel by air, irrespective of his level, then these are the support expenses which the company will certainly have to pay for. So it is always the difference between, it always depends upon the kind of support structure that the company is creating.
Okay, fair enough. So since this was this is a very intense subject, and what we have done is we also have a follow-up session, and if you wish to engage and go more deeper into the learning, there are 3 ways we have identified individual can engage with us. We have live session. We'll be starting in a formal batch, and this batch will go for like 6 sessions, and where we go more deeper into the intense topics. The batch will be starting from 20th of September, and you'll get a mail link. If you wish to engage, you can enroll yourself or your team member. We'll also have a pre-recorded sessions, and if you know if there is a date constraint, time constraint, you can definitely access to these pre-recordings. And we will also give you one-to-one session, so that in case you have any queries, any doubts, there's a personalized one-to-one coaching sessions along with each either we go for a pre-recorded one or you go for a live session. In the live session, we are giving access to 2 personal coaching session with Mr. Sunil, and in pre-recorded, we are giving 1 person coaching session along with your pre-recorded session with Mr. Sunil. Also, if you wish to engage your organization where you have more team member, you want to do exclusively for your one department, you can definitely reach us to, and we can customize the program for you. So that's all from our side, and a small gesture, a small favor. I just wanted to ask from everybody is that there's a link in your chat box. Do share your comments. We'll share the recording of this session with you. Or just a small favor is whatever your top 2 learnings are there, write in the comment section so this message reach out to maximum people, and many other people can also get benefit of such sessions. And we'll open for another few more minutes. If you have any question, we are more than happy to answer any of your questions. So thank you, Arun. Thank you, Ankur. Thank you, Kamal. Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Bedi. Any other question, will be more than happy to answer. Any ending notes, Sunilji, from your side?
Well, I think I really enjoyed sharing my experience, because I think the questions were extremely relevant, and they were all from the and I could feel that everyone was very keen to understand these concepts. So extremely enriching session for me as well.
Right.
So I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Right. So once again,
I'm looking forward to having with.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
I'm looking forward to more interaction with the people.
Okay, great. So recommend everybody to just access this link and do share your review on this link, and we'll definitely share you the recording of these sessions on your email ID, which you'll be mentioning in your reviews. So with that, I'll formally end this session. Keep your mailbox, keep watching your mailbox. We'll be coming up with more such sessions, and all these sessions are specifically, we have identified these specific topics which can help you not only to grow professionally, but also as a person. Also, it will help you to grow. So with that, thank you so much from the entire team of Challenging Horizon, and we really respect you investing your crucial 90 minutes with us. And with that, wish you a great weekend. Keep learning, keep moving. Thank you.
Thank you very much.